exist in this world. And there's some people that are just evil for the sake of being evil, and they like it.
Would you put your brother Glenn in that category?
I think Glenn would have been a wonderful father, a great human being, but he wasn't given the tools that he needed to become that person. Instead, he was given the tools to become the exact opposite of that.
Police took my brother Glenn to police headquarters in Richmond, Kentucky for questioning.
Well, we took him to the state police post, and he wanted to know what we were there for. And we said that we were there because we had 4 to 5 homicides. He said 4 or 5, maybe 70, he's up to 70, like up to 70 people. These 5 that we knew about, and that he's told us now there's more.
Glenn, why'd you do it, Glenn? Why'd you do it, Glenn? We talked to Sue, Glenn. We talked to Sue. Why'd you do it,
Glenn, your mother called me 5 minutes ago to tell me to tell you she loves you. Do you have a message for her?
Love you too. Get a car. Come on. Glenn, why'd you do it, man?
Get back. Stand back. Stay back. Hey.
Felt like that he probably had killed several, maybe 15 to 20 people. I'm not sure he did the 30 or 40 or 70, but I think he has killed more than what we know, because he killed those 3 or 4 real quick.
This is November the 14th, 1995, jail docket from Madison County, Kentucky. I'd like to call the case of Glenn Edward Rogers. Mr. Rogers?
Yes, sir.
I want to read to you at this time your rights.
When a case like this comes to a climax and a guy like Glenn is arrested, police departments all over the country start pulling out their unsolved cases and looking to see, could he have been linked to this? And this was happening all over.
Glenn was under arrest and the suspect killings. There was Cynthia Berger in California, Jean Ludwig in Michigan, Valerie Brooks in Kentucky, Kayla Mayberry in Louisiana, as well as Carrie Gaskins, Kelly Camargo, and Tommy Wolsifer in Ohio.
My phone rang nonstop in my office from agencies all over the United States and Canada calling, inquiring about our investigation and trying to find some link, you know, maybe to some unsolved murders that they had in their jurisdictions. Basically, if Glenn is connected a smidgen of these other agencies, there's a lot of bodies that he's responsible for in the United States.
My brother had been moving around the country like a tornado for 15 years. When police took a closer look, they found a pattern. Rare types of killings, bodies left in tubs, frenzied stabbings, and women burnt in cars. We're turning up in places Glenn had passed through, matching him like a glove. Journalists began checking on what my brother might have done.
I started walking the streets of Hamilton, asking people if they knew Glenn Rogers. I asked if there were any other unsolved murders in Hamilton at the time. And by now, this was about 1.5 years after the death of Mark Peters, and soon found that indeed there was. There was an Emerson Skinner. He lived 2 doors down from Glenn. Emerson Skinner died brutally, 28 stab wounds. Emerson Skinner was a taxi cab customer of Glenn Rogers. Right away, I started finding bodies. And every time I found a body, there was a trace of Glenn Rogers there.
Right here there with the yellow.
Police decided to take a closer look at our cabin in Kentucky where Glenn had left Mark Peters' body.
Okay. We're searching for any evidence of human remains.
I learned later searchers found human bone and hair in 2 fire pits which could not have belonged to Mark Peters. A sign Glenn had killed at least another couple of people up there. But for all the killings my brother was linked to, only one state could try him at a time. Florida said they had the hard facts to get Glenn convicted and put in the electric chair.
Tampa is the last place Glenn Rogers wants to be, but he lost his 6-month battle today to stay out of a state known for its executions. If prosecutors get their way, Rogers won't leave Florida alive.
From the first time I talked to him in Hillsborough County Jail, I told him his only recourse was to come clean, and at least that way they would know that he was sick to begin with, and he'd have some shot, or maybe life in prison. He has something that he most definitely wants to say, not sure who it's to. It turned out it would be a criminal profiler called Anthony Mioli who first wrote Glenn in 2009. He was trying to figure out what could turn a man into a killer, and Glenn began sending letters back to him.
Over the past 2.5 years, we've been writing on a regular basis. It took about 6 or 7 months before I received my first initial breakthrough. Rogers had revealed to me a traumatic childhood event that occurred with his father around 1975 or 1976, putting him around 13 years of age. And he went into great detail. It was the 1970s. I was forced to go to work every day at 3:30 p.m. with my dad. He was a janitor for the United Way in Hamilton, Ohio. On many days, he would bring a lady back with him and go to the basement. On one night, he did the same. Earlier, Mom had called about 10 times. I said he was outside working. She called me a liar and cussed me out over and over again. A while later, the lady came up from the basement and says, "Your dad wants to drink from the jug." The phone was ringing nonstop. She grabbed my face cheeks and says, "You be a good boy." I said, "You ain't my mom. You're a damn whore." She said, "Your mother's a stupid bitch," and walked down the hallway. I got really, really pissed, and the damn phone was still ringing. I jumped up, ran down the short hallway, and pushed her from the back down the basement steps. Then, out of fear from hearing my dad yell, I ran and hid in the closet. I heard screaming and yelling, and then all of a sudden it went quiet. It seems like forever. Then my dad calls my name. "You good for mother bastard? You done it now. You killed her. She's laying on the floor." I couldn't tell if it was blood on the floor or if it was wine. He said, "Boy, we gotta clean up this mess." Kept saying, "You can't tell anyone or they will put you in prison and beat you every day." I felt scared, but good also. It was the first conversation I ever had with my dad. In a strange way, it changed things forever. We got her, put her in the trunk of an '88 Oldsmobile. We crossed the Kentucky Bridge into Kentucky. Then Dad pulls over, drags her and carries her to the side of the road. Comes back, shuts the trunk and gets in the car. He says, "Boy, a snitch is the worst kind of person. When we get home, you don't say a word." But what he didn't know is I wanted to brag to Mom and say, "I killed that bitch for you. She called you a name." But I knew better. After this, Dad didn't take me to work anymore. Didn't even look at me. He said, "Boy, you're no good. I can't take you anywhere." It wasn't any time before I stopped being scared. I hated everyone in our home. I spent the next few years taking it out on other people. If someone didn't like me, I didn't care. I just hated them more. To this day, I don't know if I killed her when she fell down the stairs or if he did, but I was made to believe I did it. Your friend, Glenn Rogers.
And nothing ever happened about it. It's just not that hard to get away with. You dig a hole far enough out and deep enough, no one ever knows.
This murder was Glenn's first big confession to the criminal profiler. Now Glenn was ready to come clean on another crime, the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. Back in 1994, my brother Glenn told me he'd met Nicole Simpson, that she was rich, and that he was going to take her down. Just a few days later, a neighbor found the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole outside her Brentwood home.
While I was thinking Glenn had done it, L.A. prosecutors charged O.J. with the crime.
The trial began January 24th, 1995, with O.J. Simpson charged with killing his ex-wife and her 25-year-old friend, Ron Goldman. Prosecutors used a range of graphic devices to prove their case.
The animation showed the government's theory that O.J. Simpson came to Bundy, went through the front gate, killed Nicole, then struggled and killed Ron Goldman, and then left out the back gate.
But the prosecution changed their claim on how the victims had been attacked when new evidence was laid out by the coroner.
Dr. Lakshmanan said Nicole's head was slashed. She was banged against the wall and knocked unconscious. At that point, the prosecutor revealed a new theory. The murderer left Nicole and killed Ron Goldman, then came back for what is described as the coup de grace.
Well, when we first saw it, it presented O.J. Simpson as the murderer, sole murderer, in this alcove. It just didn't fit. By that time, we'd come up with the fact that there had to be more than one person.
After 8 months of evidence and 3 hours of deliberation, the trial of the century ended October 3rd, 1995.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
When did you kill those women? How many people did you kill? Did you kill him, Glenn?
6 weeks after O.J. was found not guilty, the law caught up with Glenn. It wasn't long before my brother was dropping hints about his past crimes.
First time I heard about Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman's murder, I was in my office in Van Nuys and really thought nothing more about it. One day I did receive some letters from a prison inmate indicating that Glenn Rogers had written to him that he had met Nicole Brown Simpson, and the inference was, and you know what else? We forwarded it immediately to the O.J. Simpson prosecutors.
Authorities ignored clues leading to my brother, and it would be years before Glenn came back to that story.
Glenn wasn't going to drop hints and letters this time. My brother had learned a new trick during his years on death row: how to paint.
These are pictures that Glenn Rogers actually drew in his cell at various times during our correspondence.
Glenn was even able to paint the demons he believes have lived inside him all his life.
Glenn had explained to me the meaning of this piece. Basically, what you see here is two bottomless abysses, and this is the evil within him looking into the deep abyss and seeing two huge tunnels leading down into hell.
At first, Glenn drew what took over his mind when crimes occurred. Then my brother started drawing hints about the blood he had shed.
At this stage of our relationship, Glenn starts to include clues and/or names and/or places that he knows I will find in a certain amount of time.
In June 2011, Glenn sent the criminal